that time, the National Electricity other two laws then was creating a gas authority as well as creating a petroleum pipelines authority. So in essence, we are a body of 9 for regulating the is in fact more like a commission, where there are different from other commissions where most commissioners will be 5 commissioners all full time. Responsible for areas. So my primary responsibility is electricity regulation. I'm continuing from here also a full-time regulator, primary responsible for petroleum pipeline regulation. Setting good and joint, but also then have full-time responsible for regulator who's the CEO who is responsible for administration and managing the affairs of NERSA. So that's in essence what NERSA is.
Is that we regulate companies that have got business models. Regulator, we are a creature of statute. So ours is driven by law. It's driven by some aspects of the law some aspects of businesses might be regulated and others may not be regulated. For instance, for transmission, it's very likely that the transmission company of South Africa will hopefully also provide a communication platform. So on the wires, that they will probably also transmit data. We're hoping that's going to be, but that's going to be a business, and it makes operations. But the data side would not be regulated by NERSA. So I guess what I'm saying is that, so I just thought that it would be useful then to start this conversation by indicating, just so we are aligned in terms of when we're talking about transmission operator or a transmission and systems operator, what are we talking about? When we're talking about defined concepts in the law. So, and we all know that, like yesterday, the amendment bill, the electricity regulation amendment in Parliament was introduced in Parliament. Hopefully it will be considered before the end of this and promulgated before the end of this 5th or 6th Parliament. I can't remember nowadays which number is this. But we still have an Electricity Regulation Act of 2006. That is the act that governs us. So I just thought let's start with that definition. So when transmission, a transmission systems operator license has been granted to NPC-NERSA, the National Transmission Company of South Africa. What do we mean? So the law defines transmission, and it defines it as a conveyance of electricity through a transmission power system, but it excludes trading. That's what the law says. By the way, the same definition also applies to distribution. So that's the first one. Then the law also defines trading. And it defines trading as buying or selling of electricity as a commercial activity, that is for profit. So those two concepts are defined in the law. However, the law talks about import and export licenses, but it doesn't define what that means. Therefore, if it's not defined, it means then we then need to apply a dictionary version of it. But also, in respect of what we're going to talk about today, there are some activities that we've applied for which are like systems operation. Systems operator at this stage is not licensable. However, in the bill that's coming, it is envisaged that it will be a licensable activity. The national systems operator will be an activity. The same as the market operator. It's not defined, but it is envisaged that going forward it will be. Single buyer, we all know about Eskom being a single buyer. It is also not a licensable activity. In the new bill, it goes by the name of central purchasing. And it was important for it to be called central purchasing because it distinguishes itself from the purchasing that can be done by other distributors. So you all know about Section 34. So that's what this one refers to. So I just thought we would actually start there because that's what informs us. So Eskom made, for instance, that has got 3 components and have applied for 3 separate licenses, but as the regulator, you could only tackle one at a time. And in this particular case, it had to be sequenced with the transmission license first. Now, also just by way of background, I thought it's important to understand that reform generally has some level of unbundling globally. It has, it's linked mostly to unbundling. But different countries do this for different reasons. But in South Africa, unbundling had 2 primary drivers. And maybe we may be starting with what normally follows in other countries, that is the shareholder, which is DPE in this case, decided that for efficiency reasons and for transmission and distribution. But that's just on the shareholder side. And when it unbundles, by the way, it does not mean it unbundles, but it may still retain ownership through the same holdings company, which is what has happened in our case. So that's the important part. But also just to clarify, unbundling does not equal privatization. Most people. Unbundling is simply saying, if I'm running a particular business, I've got 3 different businesses that require 3 different mindsets and people that can run them. So that's what unbundling from the shareholder point of view would be, driven by efficiency in the main. However, there may be national energy drivers. Like in our case, we're looking to see to get greater private sector participation. And for the private sector to be able to participate, it needs to make sure that some of the services that are essential services like transmission and distribution, that your power will be dispatched if it meets the requirement of the system. So that's the first one. But therefore, you really need to have. And then, of course, it also is about efficiencies. It's about, but there are lots of other priorities or drivers in terms of national policy that drive unbundling. But I just thought I would also just look at it. So most people, when they hear unbundling, it's like it's one thing, but there are, you all know that in most countries, utilities, a utility would be responsible, like in our case, Eskom was, or Eskom has been, responsible for generation, transmission, and distribution. And then it will then have, to some extent, some level of other participation, like municipalities, who are really just acting as redistributors rather than distributors. So in that particular case, you only really, so the numbers that we were talking about earlier, that's 18.64%, is the Eskom retail tariff. So that is and that becomes the starting point. It's an integrated tariff. But then decisions, a shareholder has indicated, may decide to functionalize and functionally, or in terms of accounting. With that, ordinarily, then unbundled tariffs become important, because then those become centers, they become not cost centers, they become profit and loss centers, and therefore they need to be, and they are managed separately, mostly in preparation for the other form of unbundling. In our case, we now have what we call legal unbundling, where transmission company NTC-NERSA has actually been legally separated from Eskom, although it is still owned by Eskom Holdings. In that particular case, unbundled tariffs become critical. But there are other domains where in some places people, it's not just legal separation, but there is a formal separation in terms of unbundling, that you then have a separate transmission systems operator, for instance, that will be totally owned by somebody else. It's got nothing, it's separated completely from the utility. Now, in some cases, combine the transmission and systems operator. They create a systems operator who's independent and create a transmission operator who's also a separate entity. But it just depends. So I just thought I would share that with you. But for all of those, it is supported by an unbundled tariff environment. Now, as I've indicated in Eskom's case, it's a legal TSO. It's a legally unbundled TSO, legally unbundled transmission systems operator. The advantages, of course, are that we can now be able to see the costs. There are lots of costs that most of us are not aware of, including ancillary services that are provided. That is the backup power, capacity. Look, I know that we have load shedding at the moment, and therefore maybe that's a bad example. However, we will come out of load shedding, and when we come out of load shedding, you always need to have capacity. That capacity sits somewhere. It's not active power, it's not making money, but it's there to protect all of us. Now that service is provided, it needs to be isolated and paid for. It's hidden. Most of us don't see it. Perhaps that's why we are in the situation that we're in right now. And then of course, but the problem with this legally, with legal separation is that it's got its own challenges, that it does not provide a complete independence. So that is the issue that I think in respect of the amendment bill, that is the issue that is going to be addressed. So I'm not going to bore you with the detail on all of this, but the slides will be made available. But I just thought I'll just flag that. Now, what does NTC-NERSA TCAO actually is? And to also contrast that with what it is not. So what it is that it is about managing the transmission system. So when we hear that there are constraints in the grid, we need to have a grid capacity in the right places, of right size, and is properly maintained. So that if, for instance, even with trees, because you know with transmission, there are all sorts of issues with transmission. I'm not even talking about theft, which they actually need to deal with. But it needs to plan, build, maintain, and manage and operate the system. But it's not just about the wires business. Electrons that go in there. It's about frequency modulation. It's about all sorts of business. It's about all sorts of things that they do to make sure that we don't have a blackout. Now, it needs to buy power of the country, may need to export parts. So it needs to buy, sell, import, and export power for grid system maintenance, for grid stability. But the way it works, it should be ideally not for profit. It's an essential service. What I'm saying is not for profit. It's not trading. It's look, a return is a cost. A cost. So that part is something that is always debatable. Some domains allow it, others don't. But it's meant to be, their costs are collected from everybody who remains grid connected, even people that may have rooftops. Even as long as you remain grid connected, that potentially can bring electricity to your home, you need to contribute to most of those costs. But the whole point is, charges need to be cost reflective. But in the main, what it needs to do is to provide what is called access to the system, to the grid. What it is not. TSO does not trade. That is, it does not buy power for purposes of arbitrage, for purposes of making a profit. It buys power to stabilize the grid. So, I'm just talking about the TSO part of the business. It cannot discriminate in terms of access, in terms of tariffs, and in terms of prices and conditions of service. If there's any discrimination, it has to be approved by the regulator. Charge a tariff other than that is set or approved by the regulator. I just thought I would indicate that part of the license being granted to NTSA, transmission license, was granted with a number of conditions. Firstly, it is a 25-year license. Secondly, as I've indicated, it can procure all necessary services for grid stability. And NTSA, unfortunately, was not granted an exclusive right. In other words, this is explicit. We are hoping that perhaps the amendment bill may clarify this, that are we going to have only a single national transmission operator, or would that be open number of players to participate? But in most countries, you only have one. They might be state linked, or they may be national, depending on whether you have a federal system or a unitary system. Powered to buy, sell, import, and export power for purposes of grid stability. Pictorial, what do we mean by this? So, in essence, what we are saying is that the transmission system has got three parts in the main. They are the national network service provider. So they plan for that, invest in it, operate it, and so that is a licensable activity at this stage. But they've also applied and were granted a systems operator license. But it is included in this license. And they've also applied for the system network planner as a system network planner. That is also not a licensable activity. So, just now to bring it to a close, as NTCSA has also applied to be for it to be a central purchasing agency. What we've then said is that firstly at this stage that function is not licensed. That function dovetails, if you like, with the systems operator in the sense that central purchasing in the main is about capacity. Most markets in the world, you hear California, you hear all over the place, PJM in the US and Nord Pool, everywhere. Australia has got a few of these TSOs. Is that the challenge with the market is that so this function in our case is a function that therefore will perhaps remain integral in our system. So it could be a version of what we call a Section 34, which would be primarily focusing on grid stability. Although the private sector would be allowed to actually purchase power without going through a Section 34 process for grid stability, so you can add capacity. So that is but at the same time, of course, it can also play other roles if it so chooses. That's why in graphic I've actually made it strangled. It's not totally inside the TSO, but it plays a significant role in the TSO, but in the main it's outside. The trading function. And it's being considered separately, but it is a separate function. It is a licensable function and it is separate. As indicated, it's about the TSO would like to buy and sell power for commercial reasons, over and above the power that it buys and sells in respect of supporting the functions that are within that bigger circle. There is a third license that was applied for, which is an import and export license. Earlier is that to be able to operate a system, and we have to remember that although we have a TSO, which is a national transmission systems operator, it operates within a region as we would like it to be, but we still have connectivity. So it's the regional transmission operators have got an obligation to actually engage power, sell power, and buy power for grid stability. So they are allowed to do that. That is in fact a so that's on the import and export. However, having said that as well, with the trading license, with the central purchasing facility or function, it straddles. As a TSO and export for the TSO functions, but it also may want to actually undertake this activity, import and exporting, as a commercial. That those are looked at properly. Okay. Just second last slide is, as I've indicated, that unbundling bundled tariffs in a bundled value chain. That is, you can have one player that generates power, transmits power, distributes power, but it can have unbundled tariffs. It can. It's not a prerequisite. In our case, we only have one Eskom retail tariff. However, when you unbundle the value chain, it is impossible to have an unbundled value chain with bundled tariffs. It's even worse if that unbundled value chain has got different owners. You need to unbundle the tariffs. I think I was, but the whole point around recovery, so it allows in the TSO case an explicit recovery of ancillary services, which at the moment are hidden, and most of us don't know that we need to pay for them. And then of course, it then allows for consumers to benefit from transparency. So in closing, we see the granting of the transmission license to the NTSA as a game changer. Participation, it is, but I need to stress, unbundling is not a panacea for our problems. That you've unbundled and you've created an NTCSA, it does not mean that tomorrow we're going to have capacity that needs to be added. Still need to see other things to make sure that whatever money they put into the system, they can recoup those monies. It is not a panacea, but it's a significant start in the progress of us addressing our energy security challenges. It is the first transmission license issued under ERA, because the other one was just a conversion from the 1987 Act. And so just to indicate that we were kind of hoping, and this is the engagement we are having with the NTCSA, that in respect, we're always hoping that that was enough to fully operationalize the TSO. However, the NTCSA has got a particular business model they've applied for that are going to serve before the energy regulator by the end of this month. I thank you.
Colleagues, any questions at this stage? It's a mouthful.
for the benefit of the online audience as well.
I'll come to you. Okay. And the media house will talk and then ask your question, please.
Thanks so much. My name is NERSA. I have 8 questions.
Oh my goodness.
8. However, some of them are for him, as he's sitting here. It's not part of what you just presented. But
Okay, let's have our questions around the subject.
yes, I just want to quickly understand. Please maybe clarify, because we're staying in Pretoria, it's a metro. What is the difference between the municipality and ISCOM itself when it comes to district? Because we know that most municipalities, they don't generate electricity themselves. We want to understand that one, and it will go to the unbundling, the 3 types of unbundling. If maybe someone within the municipality wants to take the role of distributing the power. Right. And we know that as NERSA is the grid of the power supply in the country. I heard that there are power shifts coming in the country. Is NERSA also the non-South African distributors of power, so that maybe if they come into the country, we don't get ourselves are not regulated by NERSA? I think I'll stop there for now. And also, I just want deal with the minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. I'm glad at your start you mentioned the 8.65%, and I'm not going to 18.65. The method. But what considerations are made when such, high, what seems to be high tariffs are made, considering that the economy is not performing too well? And what are we likely to see in the next phase of increased tariffs? 2 questions.
Are those the questions from the floor now? If I can also add a question, Mr. Pineda, you mentioned that there are certain aspects that ancillary services. Does that mean that when we unbundle, we are suddenly going to pay extra because there are some things that we haven't been paying for and they must now be added? If you can just give us an idea whether this unbundling will lead to higher tariffs. And in the next, there's another question. Congress?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. My question was around the...
Just introduce yourself.
Congress, I think the role of unbundling. And I think it covered a number of very key aspects. But also later on, bring a very being the game changer in the industry, but at the same time seeing this not a solution to the problems that we're facing as a country. I'm sure that the reason could have been there earlier on why the decision was taken. the unbundling, where does he have a brief example in terms of relating to us, where this privatization was key fundamental as a question of keep on repeating that area that this is not a privatization. That means, why did this come, where does it come from? Why this perception is always keep on increasing every time and they keep on emphasizing the same point? We know ultimately that this is a modified form of privatization. We know it will end there. Saying that we will challenge in terms of to think deep into our point. This is a fundamental. I think so the way the perspective very well. I mean, in practice, I doubt completely.
So you privatization. Is that right?
Yeah, no, that's my point of view. That this is a pure privatization.
Okay, can we give Mr. Gomede an opportunity, and then after that we'll see if there are questions from the online.
I'm tempted to start with the last question, but I'll talk to it last. But it's a fundamental question. I'll give you a number of examples, and examples will shock you actually. Okay, let's start with Mr. Ndlovu. Difference between municipal. In terms of the law, there is none. There is no difference in terms of the Electricity Regulation Act. But remember where we are coming from. We are coming from where, in fact, ESCOM, that's why all of the tariffs of municipalities are based on an ESCOM retail tariff. So most of municipalities at this stage, and why they're possibly referred to as redistributors, which is a concept which is foreign in the law. There is no such thing in the law as was a generator or is a generator. But to some extent now there is a private sector, but as called the generator is a transmitter of power and is also a distributor of power. But in terms of the law also separates distribution from trading. And ESCOM is also a trader of power. So, but then of course with the advent of our constitution, greater powers were given to municipalities to exercise services. So the municipalities then became redistributors, if you like, because they themselves had perhaps not taken on the role of being a, although they are Tshwane municipality in an area where it might, in a particular, like in Tshwane here, there may be areas that are supplied by ESCOM, but there are areas that are supplied by Tshwane. And Tshwane and ESCOM are equal distributors in a particular area. They've just got their own zones. The difference is that the other distributor buys. So that is the only difference.
Then they become a redistributor.
That's why you become a redistributor. So that is, I'm hoping that. So what unbundling will do, it will put everybody on an equal footing. Municipal distributors, in terms of the law, they are equal to ESCOM distributor. So in terms of pricing and everything else, they should also be treated equally. Integrated utility, and I do have a distribution leg. I have every right to actually provide all of those services. Second question. Power sheets. Again, I was hoping, the reason why I like the idea of starting with unbundling, so we are quite clear. Power sheets will not play in transmission, they will not play in distribution, and they will not play in trading. That is, I don't know where they are at the stage. We are last, there may be changes, but the point is, power sheets would be one of those generators, private generators of power. As much as we've got a lot of these IPPs, they are also generators. I like to stress that because it talks to a question later. The difference is that, which is something that perhaps is not always communicated. There is dispatchable power and there's non. Dispatchable power is that sometimes people get paid for just sitting there and waiting. of course, when we say you are waiting and your engines are turning, you have staff there, you've got the equipment there, you're consuming some level of gas. So that's what you call capacity. You need to pay for that capacity. In some, to keep the grid stable, they provide a service which is called reactive power. So in terms of power, there's active power, which is what we all consume, and then there's reactive power, which is balancing the system. So is it always important, therefore, when we look at generators, that one form of generator is not the same as the other, depending on what it provides. For instance, hydro, especially if it's run-of-river hydro systems, is that they are generators, but they are clean. But not only do they provide active power, but they also provide this reactive power. So that's a capacity. Sometimes you pay for not just for the active power, but you also pay for the capacity power. Which talks to your question, which I'll expand later. But anyway, when it comes to power ships or any of the IPPs, generation. So what's this one? So what the transmission company would do in this particular case for what they've applied for is that they would buy that power and on-sell that power. It's the distributors that buy the power and or the traders are the ones that buy the power. The owners of the wires, they own the wire, they operate the wire, they make sure the wire is run properly, both as a national systems operator as at distribution systems operations as well. So that's what normally they do. But there is, of course, the trading of power. They are the ones normally that contract with the car power ships of this world. So I'm hoping that's clear. And then, Ray, tariffs. Tariffs is, I know is a basic service. And some domains, like road, some domains they would say, for a basic service, for the capital, that via the fiscus, but for the operation to get people to pay for it. Some people, unfortunately, also have a thing that says, well, it is an essential service, therefore it should not be funded by government, basically funded through our taxes. But as you know, taxes can only do so much. And when it comes to electricity, you need to make sure that whoever provides the service can recoup the monies they have invested. So that's the basic construct of tariffs. That is, they must be cost reflective. That is, you recognize what the costs are, and those costs can take the form of capital, there's depreciation, certain return, especially if it's the private sector, they would want to have a decent return. And also, it's about recovering all of the operating and maintenance costs. So that's the main thing that goes. But in our case, because we had an integrated utility, where basically an ESCOM was providing all of the services, we only see one tariff, which is the ESCOM. We don't see the build-up of these tariffs. But that's where tariffing is a simple idea of you need to have an instrument based in per kilowatt hours, a number that allows an operator to recoup all of those costs. But in some cases, of course, governments do decide to take some of the costs, but there is an element there and an element of efficiency that then says, when they were investing in this cost, the question is, were those investments prudent? Were those investments efficient? Now that's where the role of that's where the regulator comes in. We need to test that. So that's why you then introduce the market to then say, at the generation level, instead of sending a regulator to go and try to see whether the investment in could see they were prudent or not, or whatever, you let the market, you let that plant to compete with others, because if it was not, it will not be able to recoup all of its costs. So that is the tariff side. Going forward, the tariff levels. High tariffs for that. Answer to that is not for people who are grid connected, because you are already paying for these tariffs. It's just that the issue, the importance of unbundling is simply this. So you actually hear people saying, it is cheaper, I can provide my own electricity in my house cheaper than I can buy from ESCOM. Is that true? The problem with that analogy is that it's a very misleading concept, because as I've indicated, what you provide, for instance, if you've got if you've got your own generator at home, whether it's rooftop, whether it's solar or wind or even a diesel, active energy at that particular point in time. That's all you're providing, energy. But unfortunately, there are wires that come into your house. There are wires that are distribution lines. There are wires that are transmission lines. So they are network costs. So when we are comparing your own generation with ESCOM, we are discounting those networks. If you are not grid connected, that's a fair arrangement. But remember what I was saying earlier as well, is that now when that capacity, if you are only providing energy to yourself and you are not accounting for capacity, that's not a fair comparison either. Is that for most people, we know that I'm sure you've seen when after load shedding or just before load shedding, lights dimming and whatever. That's about frequency. It's about, and the systems operator has to make sure that we are at 50 hertz. If it means dropping and keep you at 50 hertz, then that's what it does. Because if we drop below 50 hertz, the system will collapse. So it maintains that. That comes at a cost. Sometimes it needs to put in a new plant. So it means the plant must have been waiting there. It must be a dispatchable plant. So it must have been waiting. So it's paying for that. So to answer you, no, we'll just get greater visibility of those costs. So, and those who are also then saying, I'm providing energy for myself, they need to know that perhaps the question that they need to honestly answer, because at the time when we are providing, but the wires are coming to your house, when we are not consuming, who's paying for that wire? Who's paying for those services? Who's paying for the capacity that's sitting there waiting? Somebody else is, who's not providing. So that's an important part. Now, the Congress, your issue, bundling. I'm going to use an example that most people see, and I'm choosing this example on purpose. Norway's electricity sector, contrary to what most people will think, is that when we've got IPPs here in Norway, mostly it's about hydro. Guess who owns those hydro plants? It's the municipality. So if you have to go, and they are the ones who are selling power onto the grid. So the fact that it is an unbundled process, the fact that each municipality then has its own business, in fact, in Norway in particular, Statneft, which is responsible for the transition system, is 100% government owned. The systems operator, it is government pool is owned by the 4 Scandinavian countries, but governments of those countries. It is not private owned. You go to most places, especially on the transmission side, it has never been privatized. You've got very few examples. I think it's Spain or Portugal and the UK who are the explicit example. But in our continent, which is unbundled, all of that is still owned by the state. Yes, of course. In some cases, the actual operations to a private sector. That happens. In Uganda, for instance, you've got most people who know that they've got an entity called Umeme, which runs distribution, but it is on a concession basis. It is not privatized. So I know it is a hot potato, as honestly, does not necessarily mean privatization. It does not mean that other countries don't privatize, but it's really. I'm hoping I've answered all questions.
What are the online questions?
Not that I have seen so far. No. No questions.
Okay. My last question based on the presentation. Let's say I'm owning a mall, for example, and then as a landlord, I proper and talk with solar systems. When there's load shedding, I have run my solar system and charge my tenants as what ESCOM and NERSA regulated as the official term. Is that fraud or is it illegal to do, or can we just continue with it? Thank you.
System operator and the market operator. And where the market operator in South Africa will sit, will that also be in the National Transmission Company, or will it be separate? Please just explain that structure to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Just last two questions. I can see you've had a number of experiences with this electricity industry. We have in South Africa the structures have always been like this. You have integrated, vertically integrated. Then you had the municipalities as redistributors, although they're supposed to be distributors. Then you've got a group of people who are not. Most of them are extremely naughty because most of them are registered now. They are registered on the basis that they cannot charge a tariff other than the tariff of the distributor for whom they are reselling. That is, you should not get. Then, if you are in Tshwane, for instance, you should not have, if your electricity is provided by a reseller, you would have Tshwane a tariff, then the reseller adds something on top. That is it's a criminal offense. It is illegal. Now, bring those people who might be trading now without a license, because it's quite clear what we are referring to. The mall owners are neither resellers nor distributors. It is illegal in South Africa to without a license or being registered, or unless you've got an explicit exemption from minister, without a license. It is illegal to transmit without a license. It is illegal to distribute without a license. It is illegal to trade without a license. And if you have a license, you can only charge a tariff that which is set or approved by the energy by the regulator. So those mall owners who are illegally selling power, that is illegal. That's criminal. Then your last question after that. It's actually a simple one. As indicated, systems operation and transmission operation are related in the sense that it's about running the grid, if you know. operating the grid, dispatching. So you're supposed on the generator side, you've got generators that are on merit order. That is, you've got the cheapest that you're going to dispatch first, all the way until you dispatch the most expensive. Now, when you've got a market operator, what the market operator then does in a day-ahead market is that it then says, at this particular hour, knowing the demand out there, how much from each of you guys are prepared to put, how much are you prepared to sell at what price? So everybody a price. Then what it then says, I'm assuming that there is no load shedding, because the market fails when there's load shedding. So the market operator works only if there is no load shedding, if there is capacity to sell. So you have. So the last plant that balances the market, or the marginal generator, is the one that sets the price for everybody. Now, who manages that process? It's the market operator. We've got a market. So it's the market operator's role is really about price discovery. And of course, the market operator sometimes then hands over to the systems operator, who then says, 500 was going to be a number, 500 megawatts at this particular point, but because there's a cold front coming from Cape Town, it was not predicted, it's 520, there's a you now need to then balance. So the systems operator or the then goes out into the market and buys that balancing power to then balance the market for the sole purposes of keeping. That's the difference. So they actually work together. In some cases, they separate out the systems operator from the market operator. But in most cases, like what was envisaged in South Africa with ITSMO, which was going to be an independent transmission system and market operator, is that these three functions are related. They are different but related. For transmission, more on the electron side. What's the other? It's about money, it's about over, and all sorts of other shenanigans that come on traders.
And in South Africa, are we going to have it?
Well, there we're unfortunately going to be guided, as I've indicated at this stage under the Electricity Regulation Act. Systems operation is not licensable, market operation is not licensable, central purchasing is not licensable. But we're hoping that with the ERA amendment bill, it will then clarify that. But there is value in putting them together, but they are different. So it's just that it needs with that understanding that you might have two different skills which you need. One for dispatching and ensuring that the system integrity is maintained, and the other to manage the market itself.
I think I just want to, maybe on the same point, Mr. Dumeke, what are you as a regulator advocating for? In as far as the license? And secondly, correct me if my assumptions are just out of the window. I'm really struggling to comprehend being used by ESCOM. It's not correct, because we're paying for an integrated, for this integrated system or approach that they are taking, and hence the rethink of the whole structure. So are we supposed to be paying for the whole integrated approach? And as NERSA, what are you advocating in terms of the rethink of this? Thank you.
Okay, firstly, the first one. Do we advocate for anything? No. We get given. We are consulted as the practitioner. What are your experiences? What is your view? So that's why when a law is written, it is or regulations are written, they are written after consultation. So we work with is what we get given by Parliament. Hopefully what we get given by Parliament is workable, because we participated in the process. Unfortunately have any particular choice. We may have individual preferences, but they remain individual preferences, and as regulators we come and go. So the answer to that, no, we actually don't have any preference. Now, tariffs. Visibility is always important. As we are asking the question, I was trying I was trying of your. It's like going into it's like all of the when someone asks you what is cheaper, macro, checkers, or Pick n Pay or whatever. Well, I'm actually going to answer you this way. Is that unfortunately when you're buying a basket, the beauty with the market is that it allows you to make those choices. You can pick up your menu and see what issues. The problem with is that you don't know what you're buying. You don't know, and in fact, the challenge with it as well is an inefficiency somewhere in the system. It gets absorbed by everything else. But yes, someone will say, but as a regulator, you should be able to efficiencies. But it's a skills base. I mean, I always argue that we may. Well, luckily, I'm not an electrical engineer. I'm a metallurgical electricity. I don't generate electricity. But even for electrical engineers, how many of them actually know what the nuclear part of that is? I'm talking about the generation part, but the nuclear side of it, it's a very, very rare skill. It is a, and in terms of hydro plants, how many actually understand of dams and whatever? And electricity generation is a complex process. Now, the right thing is that you can have a bloated structure that sticks to actually operate. But that's why people are moving towards the market, because that's the only way in terms of efficiency. You don't have to actually know each of these generators. But what we are saying is that the market would say, if you are not efficient, you will not be dispatched.
Thank you, colleagues. I think that was very informative, if a bit complex. But Mr. Komedi will still be here if you want to engage with regulator member. So I'm just going to give over to Frans first to do some announcements.
It was not for the question. I thought I wanted to ask something, but then it's fine. I'll let it pass.
You can ask during the.
So my question was on the, let's say it's a consortium of companies that are operating from same area, or maybe a group of farms operating in a particular area, and because of the load shedding crisis, they then decide that for our farming community, our own grid, then let's assume it's either the wind energy, I don't know, I can't remember the exact weight, or the solar system. What kind of licensing do they require, or do they require any kind of licensing for them to then operate in such space? Let's say a residential complex. Thank you so much.
Okay, I was to be the wire side of the business is a trick, because you can't get too many wires coming into your house. Once somebody the wire that comes into a particular township, whoever has got the right to, or rather has been given the right to distribute, that is to actually build the wires on that. You can't have a second person. It would be the most inefficient way of doing this. Besides, you'll end up with wires crisscrossing all over. And I'm sure you've seen those in other parts of the world. Right? It is so. On the distribution side, on the wire side, it's quite clear that you always need to have one person. It does not have to be an ESCOM. It can actually, people can create mini grids where they then decide that they can, as long as that grid was not connected to else before, They can create their own mini grid. They can then do the wiring in that mini grid. Then you can't get somebody else that comes and does a secondary wiring on the same thing. So I'm taking the question is actually a wires problem. The question is now the generation side.
Yes.
Now that you now have the wires there, can somebody who's not complex, but then somebody did then decide that they're going to operate, they're going to run things that are running on that road, but they're not going to service the road because it's not their road, right? The wires is no different. So you need to be able to separate the two. Then say, so somebody then says, look, I'm going to generate my own power. But then you're asking the question, but you're going to generate your power and it's going to run on whose wire? Also, what happens when the wind, so you are remaining grid connected, so I'm going to sit there somewhere with capacity waiting for you when the wind is not blowing. We're going to introduce this, somebody's paying for that capacity. Who's paying for the capacity? Is the poor guy who can't do this? Because unfortunately, these other costs, they tend to be socialized mainly to those that can least afford to have these own systems. Is that fair? Anyway, I may not have answered. I'm ducking your including the rates, but it does not exclude you from the rules of the owner of that network, because the owner of the network still has an obligation to maintain the integrity of that network. Anyway,
Thank you.
Thank you. Frans, do you have any announcements?
In the main, it's just few announcements that I have. Evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think it's very for making time to come to attend this discussion evening. We always appreciate as the National Press Club. The next event that we are going to be a discussion, it's a networking. It's going to be a discussion evening in Johannesburg on the 21st. In Johannesburg, the venue will be announced soon. That will be hosted by PRASA. They are going to look at their rehabilitation project. They are going to talk about their rehabilitation project and also to ask or answer the question, are they there yet? So we're going to look at. And then on the 27th will be hosted by the French Embassy at the French residence here in just up here. It will be a networking session at the French Embassy, and that one has, I guess it is a trip for two to one of the French tourism destinations. So just get ready for that. Am I forgetting anything? I don't think I'm forgetting anything for this month. I think. Thank you so much. And I think I'll ask our general manager to outstanding announcements. Thank you so much.
Evening once more. So on my side, building on the success of last year's Pesikoboza Memorial Lecture. I'd like to urge you to please diarize the 19th of October. It will be a Thursday. It will be in the morning as per last year. We should be starting around 10, 11 in the morning. Invitations should go out within the next week or so. It's going to be quite exciting. I think for those of you that have week or two, where seasoned journalists were going after the junior journalists in terms of how the reporting of the buildings that have been burning in Joburg is concerned. So we should be touching on that, that how has journalism evolved to meet up with the modern needs as far as reporting is concerned. So our chairperson, Kennedy Mzuli, who couldn't join us this evening. Deputy Chairperson. Oh, Deputy Chairperson. Oh, my bad, Chair. He's not promoted as Chairperson of the Press Club, is engaging our identified speaker to deliver this year's lecture, who has been identified as Sanjile Memela. For those of you you will agree that he's the best choice to deliver the lecture. And I think even more interesting is the fact that he has worked under the late to reflect on what journalism was back then and how it has really evolved to meet up with the needs of modern day. And then we still urge you to pay your membership. Approaching the later part of the year where we renew our membership. You will be invoiced in due time. Remember, we thrive and survive on memberships as the National Press Club. So we thank you for having carried us thus far, but we need you to renew, and I'm delighted to announce that NERSA France is considering a corporate membership.
I'll make sure they're closer to you.
So on that note,
6.5%.
of course. No, specifically for them, we'll try the terrorists. On that note, it is our appreciation, and we want to convey our sincere thanks to the team at NERSA. But I think more than anything else, we always appreciate this type of discussions that really opens up into what NERSA is all about, beyond what we just read every day. So thank you to you, your team, and our comms colleague there, who has generously agreed that he will liaise with his finance team as soon as France invoices him. So I'm not sure if the food is ready. But if you haven't bought your raffle ticket, please do so quickly before it closes. And then in a short while, you should be enjoying refreshments and bites. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, that's it with the formalities. But please don't go as yet. Let's mingle and get to know each other better. Thank you.
Thank you.
But she's saying, I think now we can open the...
Bona ngiphethe mali.
I think that's a little bit more. Legal party.
Well, that day.
And I really want to know.
Madam France, you must work on this issue of raffle tickets being bought digitally also. For us,
When you might take your 5.
no,
Oh, her 3. She bought 3. Last week.
The one time.
Where
I want to tell people are still here.
they must buy.